During the summer of 2020, in the midst of the global pandemic, I found myself stuck in my room like so many other people around the world. By this time, I had exhausted all of my other games to play, and I searched for a new title to try out. This was during a Steam sale, so I was scrolling mindlessly through the store pages to see if anything stuck out to me. There was one game that did. From the screenshots featured with the game in the Steam store, I could tell that Stardew Valley was a farming simulator game with a modern 8-bit style. It had a charming appeal, and it seemed calming enough to just be a relaxing ride. While this turned out to be true, I was also very, very wrong. Stardew Valley is way more than a farming game. The game starts out with the player receiving a note from their grandpa after he has passed away, telling them that he has gifted them his old farm in a place called Stardew Valley. At this point, the player is working a dead-end corporate job and eagerly drops everything to move away from the corporate deadlock and decay into the small forgotten town of Stardew Valley. Throughout the next 3 years, the goal is to get involved with the town, meet the people, repair the community center, and breathe life back into this old place. This is the first thing that stands out about the game. It is much more than a farming simulator. Sure, farming is the first task that you engage in, and it is a constant for the rest of the game. But farming is only scratching the surface. If the player decides to, there are so many mechanics to engage with. There's fishing, foraging, mining, and slaying monsters. You can discover new hidden areas with exclusive rewards, participate in festivals and activities around the town, marry and start a family, do quests to help villagers, and dig up ancient relics to fill up the museum. There is one glaring thing I have not mentioned yet out of all of this, and that is the Stardew Valley Community Center. The Stardew Valley Community Center is a derelict structure on the outskirts of the town that the player works to rebuild. In order to do this, the player must satisfy a list of bundles with an assortment of items to grow, forage for, and mine. After completing these tasks, the player is rewarded with new unlocks, like the greenhouse, and eventually, after every bundle is completed, you restore the community center to its former glory and force the corporate entity Joja out of Stardew Valley. This last point is the very heart of the game. Again, while Stardew Valley is about farming on the surface, the game has a deeper meaning tied to the everlasting conflict between urban corporatism and rural environmentalism. As previously stated, at the start of the game, the protagonist is working a dead-end corporate job at the Joja Corporation and moves to the small farming village of Stardew Valley. This town is remote, and therefore it is not touched much by the outside world. I say not much, because there are still hints of modernity in this place that is frozen by time. Recently, the Joja Corporation, the company that the protagonist left, has set up a store that directly conflicts with the local mom-and-pop store. This conflict is even brought up in a quick cutscene when the owner of the Joja franchise confronts the local store owner. You are able to work with the town to fix the community center and restore the neighborly spirit that Stardew Valley once had. This is not just one way that Stardew Valley is touched by the outside world. If the player goes fishing, they can catch trash that has polluted the water, and it is mentioned that some of the town's residents are actually off fighting in a war. In this way, Stardew Valley can be seen as an allegory for modern-day life in a small town. In our world of increased globalization and interconnection, rural communities are slowly turning into suburbs of large cities around them. Often, this erases the way of life of the people who lived there before and irreparably changes the culture. Many small businesses are forced out as larger chain stores enter the market, and the natural beauty that is preserved is all but destroyed by pollution and new construction. Stardew Valley poses a choice for the player. They can either take the easy corporate way out, or spend the time rebuilding Stardew Valley. By purchasing upgrades from the Joja Mart, the player can quickly finish, but can never make meaningful connections with the town's inhabitants. If the player takes time over the next 3 years to rebuild their farm and community center, they also find themselves rebuilding Stardew Valley itself. The player gets to know each NPC and their stories, and in the end, start their own family and make the community whole again. This is by design. The game is all meant to be about the journey, not the destination. Different events happen each season, but the more the player involves themselves in the town, the more they'll be able to get out of these festivals that bring the town together. Unlike many open-world RPGs that claim that your choices matter and that they shape the world around you, Stardew Valley offers you a true choice. Time will pass, and seasons will change regardless of the player's actions. The townspeople will all live their lives without the player, and Stardew Valley will be preserved in its current state. Yet, if you make a choice to engage with the people of the town and build your farm, things will be able to change. The people will be happier, events will take on a different feel to you, and you can heal a community wounded by passing time. Your choices in Stardew Valley matter more than in many other games. The beauty of Stardew Valley does not stop there. Dare I say, the best aspect of Stardew Valley is the soundtrack. I am a firm believer that a make-or-break part of a game is the soundtrack. A well-made soundtrack like in Skyrim or Doom creates the right ambience for the player to find themselves in. RPGs live or die by their musical scores, and many times the music of a game tells its own story that coincides with what the player is experiencing. The pieces of music in Stardew Valley do tell their own story that matches the player's challenges and echoes the game's central themes. The soundtrack is a mashup of songs that fuse traditional instruments with computer-generated sounds. This reflects the conflict between tradition and modernity. A great way to illustrate this is by listening to two contrasting songs and comparing to where they are played. The first song is titled "The Library and Museum." The next one we will look at is titled "Icicles." The library and museum play as the player moves around the old library. This old tune reflects the oldness of the town itself, and also plays into the fact that you are in a room that one day will be filled by relics of the past. On the other hand, Icicles plays while the player is venturing in the mines. The player actively digs up ore and destroys the earth. The two types of music, one of nostalgia and the other of modernity, match the actions of the player. Yet, The only way to fill up the museum is by mining and digging up things from the ground. The music tells the story of the future of Stardew Valley and is a commentary on how we view the past today. Oftentimes, in order to understand and preserve the past, we must also embrace modernity. So, what is Stardew Valley trying to say? In a time when the planet is being destroyed by the burning of fossil fuels and a pandemic rages on, Stardew Valley is a bright spot of happiness. The game itself appears to be a simple 2D 8-bit farm simulator, but it is so much more than that. Stardew Valley reminds us of the importance of community and looking out for one another. It reminds us of how selflessness and hard work can rebuild struggling communities. Stardew Valley reminds us how truly beautiful life can be when you slow down and live in the moment. It reminds us of the beauty of the world. It reminds us that our past is just as important as our present. But most of all, Stardew Valley reminds us to go outside and live our lives.